Hey, everybody. Welcome on into ClayShare Live. I'm Jessica Putnam-Phillips, and every week we bring you a live tutorial. And tonight we have Michael Harbridge joining us again as our special guest and sponsor for the month of November for ClayShare. Michael's website is learnfiredarts.com. If you haven't checked that out yet, you should, because he has so many great products on there and some really great deals for this month. Now he's going to give us a really fun tutorial on making these lighted clay boxes, but he's also donated a $100 gift certificate for us to give away. So one lucky winner is going to win that. And to enter all of our giveaways, you go to clayshare.com and sign up for our emails. We're going to have one more $100 gift certificate at the end of the month. So if you don't win tonight, you get one more chance. All right, so I don't want to hold Michael up. He's got a lot to cover in tonight's tutorial, so let's go on over and see how he's doing. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Michael. How are you doing?
Great, Jessica. How are you?
I'm doing well. Did you get snow too?
We did. We got about 3 inches of snow yesterday. I'm assuming you did as well.
We got it today, so your snow came and visited me.
Yep. Yeah, that time of year. We've been spoiled. It's been so mild. So.
It's so true. It's so true. Well, I'm excited. Tell us what you're going to make tonight.
So I'm going to show you guys, like, we're going to do a few different things. So the gift boxes, and I got to be careful because these are clay, but this is the new tall gift box. And I'm going to show you guys how to do the coil technique. I'm going to show you a solid technique, and then we're going to flip these over, and I'm going to show you doing like luminaries or planters. You can use them for as well. But you'll notice on this one, I use the snowflake texture, and we'll talk about different textures and stuff that you can do on the ribbons. And then this is a sample of one of the solid ones, and you can do just solid clay, or on this one, I use my bark texture pad to add texture. So I was playing around with some of the rolling pins and working with other textures as well. So I got lots of different ideas with that. I'm going to set these aside. Earlier today, I went and picked, I had all 3 of the slender ones on a board, and I was just going to move them about 5 feet where I need to take a photo of them. And instead of carrying one at a time, I carried all 3 on the board, and I tipped it a little bit, and the really tall, narrow one fell into my chest. The bow broke on it, and I was like, why didn't I just carry one at a time? But we're going to make new bows for them tonight, and I'll talk about why I don't attach the bows, and that's one more reason. So I learned something today too. And this is just using it like as a luminary and leaving areas open on it that you could put a candle or a light inside here, or use it as a planter, put a glass thing in there, or a glass vase or something inside there. So there's lots of different options. There's different sizes. We'll talk about those tonight. But I'm going to flip the camera down, and we'll actually get started. And I'll show you step by step how we're going to do this. So the first one that I'll show is doing the coil technique. And if you're not familiar with my clay puzzling molds, these are ceramic bisque. They're earthenware. Most of them are 2-piece except for the cones and some of the bowls. And they come with a Velcro strap. And so you'll remove that strap from the mold, and you'll have the 2 halves. And we're going to work in both halves of the mold. And the first ones that we'll do will be the coils. And I'm going to use a hand extruder, and there are lots of different hand extruders on the market. You could roll these coils by hand, but it's a whole lot easier if you've got a hand extruder to be able to do those coils, because we're going to do a lot of different coils. So if you're not familiar with the hand extruders, they're all very similar with some type of a trigger, a barrel that holds the clay, and then there's different dies that go into the end. And so to load these, generally you push in, there's usually a lever here so that you can pull back on this, which pulls back a plunger that's inside that tube. And it pulls it back and opens that up so that we can load it with clay. So we'll pull that all the way back. We'll remove the end where the die is. And this is where we're going to drop a tube of clay in. And you generally want to have one solid tube of clay that's just slightly smaller than the barrel. You don't want to be breaking off pieces and shoving them into the extruder, because you're going to get air pockets between those pieces usually. And then a lot of times you'll get popping and air bubbles and air pockets in your clay. So you'll drop that tube of clay inside, press it in there nice and tight, take off any extra that doesn't fit. I almost had that one perfect. That doesn't happen very often. And then decide which die you're going to use. The one that I'm working with it's the 3-hole die. This is one that we create that has the 3 holes in it. Most extruders will come with a die that has a small circle, but it's a single circle. By doing the three holes in here, we get 3 coils out at a time, and it just goes a lot faster than just the 1 coil. Usually these dies are metal or plastic, and you can drill those to add holes, but we do sell the 3-hole die. Then you want to squeeze the trigger. And when you first start squeezing the trigger, you're not going to feel a lot of pressure because it's basically compressing the clay inside here and filling in any gaps that were in that tube of clay. But then all of a sudden it'll feel tight and you'll actually have the coils of clay coming out on the end. Now, if you have a hard time squeezing this trigger, most people want to squeeze it this way like a gun, and that makes sense. A lot of times I will flip it upside down and I will grab it this way and I will hold it here, and I get better leverage that I can pull on there, or I'll actually take and stand it up like this on that plunger and put my hand on here, and then I can press down. But when those coils of clay come out, they want to kind of get hung up on the ends. So I'll usually wrap my hand around there. So as I push on that trigger and the coils come out, they're not getting caught on the edge. So I'm going to extrude a bunch of clay out here. And when you do any of the clay puzzling techniques, you generally want kind of longer continuous coils. You don't want to sit here and break this into little pieces and put a bunch of loops in there. Every once in a while, you'll fill in with some small pieces, but for the most part, you want to have long continuous coils. So I'm going to grab one of these coils, and anytime I start with a coil, I want to have that overlapping somewhere on the coil so that this tip isn't hanging out there on its own. It should be covered or pressed into another coil so you don't have a sharp tip. And then as you start laying those coils inside the mold, you want to do like figure 8s, you want to do circles, you want the coils crisscrossing one another. Sometimes they will butt up next to each other, and it's okay occasionally, but try as much as you can to crisscross those coils. It'll make your piece a whole lot stronger. And anytime you end a coil, I always try to have that end on top of another coil so it's not sticking out there on its own. And then I will just continue with another coil. Now, with these square shapes, it can be a little tricky because what I find in workshops, a lot of times people do is they fill in one side and then they turn it and they fill in the other side, and they forget to have coils connecting those two halves and overlapping one another. So I'm gonna fill in this one side, but then I'm gonna start building my way up on that other side. Occasionally, I'm gonna take just a dry washcloth, or you can use a dry sponge. I like a washcloth because I can kind of wrap it around my fingers. And a lot of times when people have sharp fingernails or long fingernails, it'll poke into the clay, and this prevents fingernails from going into the clay coils and actually cutting them. And what I'm doing is I'm just gently pressing on these coils, and I'm working with a mid-range stoneware. It's Continental Clay's buff stoneware. Any clay body will work for this. I've done it with earthenware. I've done it with high fire porcelain. I do like the stoneware because of it being fired hotter. These coils are more durable, and those bows that we're going to do are more durable as well. But I've done them with earthenware. You just got to be careful with it when it's done. When I press this, what I'm looking for is, see that texture that's in the coils? I look for that texture when I'm doing a workshop, because if I see coils that are not pressed, and I'm going to add a little bit more here. When I see really rounded coils that don't have the texture, okay, even if I press on this, if I don't press hard enough, look at how easily those coils pull apart. So you're pressing hard enough that you add the texture of the towel, and that's why I like a towel versus a sponge, because a sponge doesn't always leave that texture that it's easy to see. I'm pressing hard enough that those coils stick to one another. I don't have to score, I don't have to slip, but I shouldn't be able to just take my finger and roll that coil off. It should be stuck. On the contrary, you don't want to press so hard that your coil is paper thin. If that coil is paper thin, your piece is going to be super fragile. So there's kind of a fine line. Your coils should still be rounded, but you should see that texture and they should stick to one another. Now, as I start to work my way up this side of the mold, I'm going to start with a coil that's on top. As I come around and I start doing my loops here, I want to have those coils go down and overlap part of what I already did so that this is all connected on these sides. Extrude some more clay out here.
I've got a few questions.
Okay.
One question that's come up is, what size are the holes in your extruder for those coils?
So that's a really good question. I would say this is about 1/8 of an inch. I don't know that I had a tape measure. I always have a tape measure here, and I cleaned the other day, and I think I put it away. But it's probably about 1/8 of an inch is the diameter of this. The extruder, some of them will come with different size holes, like the Kemper extruder. This is the small size hole that comes with their extruder. Shimpo, on their extruder, they have one, I call it the spaghetti die. And this one has 12 holes, or yeah, 4, 8, 12 holes in it. These are too small. If I was doing really small packages, it might work. But these are really fragile. So you want it to be a little bit bigger than this. And I'll hold up just to give kind of a perspective of the size here. You can see that these are a little bit bigger, about double the size of what the Shimpo one is. The other thing with the Shimpo one, I love this die. I use it for the beards on gnomes and lots of different things. But when you extrude this many coils out at one time, they tend to kind of stick together, and it's hard to keep them separated. We had originally, when we looked at that die, we looked at doing 4 holes or 5 holes, and I just found that if we did more than 3 coils coming out at a time, that they tended to kind of get clumped together as we extruded them out.
And then you're doing a coiling method, but could someone do a weave method with your forms, with your puzzling molds?
Yeah, you definitely could do a weave method, and really any type of method where they're going to crisscross one another. So a woven method, they would be crisscrossing. So yeah, they would definitely work for a weaving method as well.
Fantastic.
Now, as I'm working my way through here, then I've got the third side. So I've got the second side, and I've got the coils overlapping in here, but then I've got kind of the top of the mold too. So I want to do the same thing and have these all connected and going up onto that top area and make sure that they attach at some point to the other sides. And periodically, I'll take that washcloth and I'll press. Now, if you've used like the round shapes or some of the vase shapes and the other shapes of molds, you generally go right up to the edge of the mold. But with these square shapes, these edges come in. And so you want to go in just a little bit from the edge of the mold. So don't go all the way to the edge of the mold. Like right here, this little bit is going a little bit too far. I'm just going to push that in because that mold is going to come up right there, and that clay will get caught in there if you go out too far. So here I've got this coil out too far. I'm just going to push that in a little bit. And what I look for, and when I'm doing workshops and I tell people, if I can get my finger into an opening, it's probably too big and you want to have a coil going over it. The worst thing for doing this method is you take the piece out of the mold and you stand it up and it crumbles and falls apart because it's so super fragile. So make sure that you've got enough coils there so that this piece stays together and doesn't crumble and fall apart. So I'm going to go back, and this is where sometimes, you know, like here I can fit my finger and I can fit my finger in here. There's a few spots on here. So I'm just going to take a coil and run it across here and grab those areas. But this is where you could start breaking off and adding some little pieces here and there once you've got the majority of it filled in. And I'm going to press, and then I'm going to flip it here to do my top area and make sure that I get that filled in well. And on the top of the package, if you're going to be putting a big bow on here, you probably don't want a lot of openings in the top. The more solid you make it, the stronger it's going to be to hold that heavy bow when you put it on the piece. It doesn't have to be solid, but you don't want really big openings because you're going to be setting that bow on top and you want it to be strong. So make sure I've got everything pressed. Then this is going to be the bottom of our package here when we stand this up. So on the very bottom, I want to make sure that I've got a couple extra coils going along the bottom. If I don't do that, when I take it out and it's in the greenware stage, the clay stage, and I stand it up and I set it down a little bit hard on one side, if there's just a single coil there, it's going to tend to break off kind of easily. So I'll actually go and take and put a couple coils straight across the bottom. It also gives me a better finish to the bottom, that I've got a straight edge and the piece will sit better. And I'll, again, gently press those and attach them as well. So I'm going to do this to both halves of the mold. At this point, I'm looking it over to make sure I don't have any big openings. I think this is pretty good. So I'm going to set that aside and do the same thing on this other half. If you're looking to order extruders, we also sell Kemper, makes a really nice extruder that has a longer barrel, but we got an order in from them the other day and we only got, of all the extruders we ordered, we only got 3 and we sold out of those almost instantly. So I don't have any of the Kemper ones. I don't know when those are coming in. The Shimpo extruders, I checked our inventory earlier today and it looks like we only have 3 of those left in stock. And I checked with Shimpo to see how their inventory was at this point and when we might get some more. And they are currently out, but they're expecting a shipment the first week of December. So if you see on our website, if you're trying to order one and you see that it says that it's back ordered, we should have them in first part of December. And there are a lot of knockoff extruders in the market. Some of them are okay. Some of them, I've heard some things about the trigger mechanisms don't hold up real well over a long period. So try to buy from somebody that if you've got, a local pottery supply place, that they're going to stand behind it if the extruder doesn't hold up like it should, or buy from somebody online that you know that is going to take care of it if you have any issues. I know people have talked about Milwaukee Tool, and there's some others that make battery-powered caulk guns. And I've seen a lot of chatter about that, people excited, and I looked at them, and some of them were kind of pricey. The Milwaukee Tool one, I have a lot of Milwaukee tools, and so I was looking at that because I've got batteries, and the batteries are usually the most expensive part of those tools. But I haven't talked to anybody who's actually used them to know if they work really well or if they get out of control. So if anybody has actually used one, let me know. I'd be curious to see if it's worth the investment of the one I was looking at was $200 to $300, I think. All right, my extruder, when it runs out of clay, that plunger is all the way back to the end. So then I need to push that trigger, pull back on that plunger, open up the end, and drop in another tube of clay. Sometimes the die gets kind of stuck on the end, so you have to kind of slide that off. The clay kind of sticks to it. We'll get another tube of clay here. That's one of the things that with the Shimpo extruder, it's got a little shorter barrel than the Kemper one. Has a little bit longer barrel, and I tend to use the Kemper one for workshops just because it holds more clay and I don't have to load it as frequently. But both of them work really well. And both of them too, the dies are all interchangeable. They have the same size end, so the dies all work in either one. One time I tried, I thought I was going to get a head for a workshop, and I extruded a bunch of coils out the night before and put them under plastic. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. And what I found was they got all stuck together. That moisture kind of in the plastic, when you put plastic over stuff, A lot of times you get kind of the condensation building up on the plastic. Well, all of those coils were like mud the next day. So don't try to do that ahead of time. Not too far ahead of time, I should say. I left them overnight, and that didn't work. And if I don't talk and explain while I'm doing this, it goes pretty quickly. I can crank out a set of these packages in probably an hour and a half. I'm going to build my way up onto the top. And again, I'm going to make this fairly solid up here so that my bow can sit on here without any fear of it collapsing. Sometimes too, you'll get areas that look really solid, but when you take it out, there may not be openings, but you will see the coils. If you don't press too hard, you will see the coils. I'm going to add my coils to the bottom to finish my edge and to add strength. Press them. And then taking a look, make sure I don't have any big openings. Looks good to me. The next step is going to be how we're going to connect these two halves. And if you've done the spheres and other shapes, this is basically the same thing, but it's a little bit different based on the shape of this mold. It makes it a little bit different how far in you have to bend these loops. And so to connect these, if we just put these two halves together, there's really nothing to connect the two parts. So we want to make loops on one half of the mold. It doesn't matter which half. Don't do these loops until you have both halves of the mold to this point with all the coils. If you add these loops once you've completed one half and then go to do the other half, sometimes those loops will get a little dried out depending on how much air circulation you have in the area where you're working, or if you're working outside on the patio, the sun can dry them out. So I'm creating loops that stick up about 1 inch, and I'm going to go all the way around the 3 sides of the mold. I'm not doing the bottom where I'm going to reach in. I'm just doing it along these 3 sides. Those coils shouldn't stick up much more than 1 inch, and you want to just have them continuous. Again, I'm not breaking off little pieces of clay to make each one of these coils. I'm trying to stick with a longer, continuous coil of clay. It's going to make it stronger. And you don't want these loops. Sometimes people will make these loops really super close together. So I'm just going to show you here what sometimes people will do these loops and they're like that close together. Well, if you do them that close together on your piece, you're going to have almost a solid strip going all the way around, and it's going to be obvious where you've connected them. So make sure that there's space between those coils. If you have openings in your piece, make sure there's room for openings in the coils that you put to attach them together. Now I'm going to go over and I can use the towel, or at this point I can just use my thumb, and I'm just going to gently press these loops so that they are connected. And then we need to bend these in, because again, I can't take these two halves, put them together, or those coils will get caught between the halves. So normally you would just bend them down and in. But because of the square shape with these, they will still get caught between there. So you actually have to bend these. I'm going to flip this around so that they go in. So if I hold the mold on its edge like this, these loops should be flush with the top of the mold. And so you've got to be careful that you don't press down too hard, because you can break those loops off. But they need to be basically flush with the top. So when I put this other half together, they're not getting caught between the two sides. And then our Velcro strap will go on the mold. We're going to pull that nice and tight. And the nice thing with these larger packages is you can get your hand usually inside here, or you can see If you can't, I've got my handy dandy press tool with a little flashlight on it. And I take that and I go inside and I'm going to take and press those loops down to attach them to the other side. And again, I'm not pressing so hard that I'm flattening them paper thin. I'm just pressing them hard enough to attach them to the other side of the mold. Now go over it a couple times just to make sure they're all pressed. And then where these two edges meet up, where the mold halves meet up, I add a little bit of clay. I take some of these scraps and I just do like a double coil, because remember we did 2 solid coils around here and we did 2 solid coils around here. Where those mold halves meet up, I'm just going to take and add a little bit of clay there to make sure that I have a really good connection where the mold halves meet up. And I will press those, and I'll usually take then the towel around the bottom and kind of press all this and make sure that I've got a pretty level and even bottom. If there's clay sticking up in areas, I'm going to kind of, with the towel, I'm going to take it and I'm going to pinch and kind of roll it inside so that I've got a flush, even bottom on the mold. And then I can take the Velcro and remove that, and then gently wiggle the half of the mold, take that off, and I've got my shape. Now, this is the large square mold. That large rectangular piece that I showed you, I would leave this inside the mold, standing up like this for probably an hour, or if you want to set it in front of a fan on its side and let that air blow in and kind of firm it up, because on that really tall rectangular piece, when you take this half off of the mold, because it's such a long area, the side may kind of sink in on there with the coil method. On the square ones, this is the large, the medium, the small, I don't really have that problem, but the tall rectangular ones, I leave them in the mold a little bit longer. And then I work on a project board or a piece of drywall, and I can take and I can usually just kind of stand this up on the board, wiggle it a little bit, and pull that other half of the mold right off. And my piece is standing, rather than trying to lift it out of the mold and have that soft clay wanting to flex. And then I'll kind of look and I'll see, okay, are there any areas where the clay did get caught in the mold? And there's a little piece right here. I can take a needle tool or a rib and remove anywhere that there's a little bit of sharp edges. I can kind of rub it a little bit with my finger to smooth it out. I usually avoid using water on these pieces because people tend to overdo it with water, and they're rubbing and smoothing and trying to perfect it. And before you know it, the whole piece is sitting in a puddle of water and it wants to collapse. I'm not too worried about the top because I'm going to put the bow on there. Not a big deal that that's real smooth on there because it's going to get covered. But if you're a perfectionist and you want to smooth out any imperfections there, you're more than welcome to. But this is what our box looks like. I'm just looking to see if there are any areas where it's really, really solid. And I guess on the top is probably the best representation of that. Even though this area, there aren't really any openings in here, there's just some real small openings. This is where on the inside, it would look really solid and people would be like, oh, I got too many coils, I need to cut some away. It doesn't look bad when it's on the outside because you still see all those coils. So don't get obsessed about that on the inside. If you're worried about light getting through, then you might want to cut a couple coils away before you take it out of the mold. If I didn't do that and I wanted to, I could take this mold, put it right back on there, and I could cut out areas if I wanted to, but I want that top to be pretty solid. So the next thing you want to do is, you have questions, Jessica, before I move on to the ribbons?
We do. There was a question. I know you said you're using continental clay buff stoneware mid-range, but does that clay have grog in it?
This clay,
is it groggy or sandy?
I think it has just a real little bit of sand. I'm just kind of rubbing it between my finger here. It's a pretty smooth clay. If you use a real groggy or sandy clay, sometimes it's harder to get that clay through the extruder. So that might be a little more challenging. If the clay is real stiff, that can be challenging. So I usually look for a fairly smooth clay when I'm working with small coils with that extruder.
Great,
All right.
thanks.
So the next thing we want to do is ribbons. And so I've got on my Kemper extruder here, I've got the ribbon die, and I just want to show you different ribbon dies that are out there. So the Shimpo extruder comes with a large rectangle that comes with it. Through Kemper, we get these two dies, and I call these the ribbon dies. And the one that I'm working with first is the small one. The large rectangular package, I use this one. I could have used this one as well. The Shimpo one is pretty thick, but it will work. And we'll kind of, if we have time at the end, we're going to play around with adding different textures of that. And I'll talk about even on vases and stuff, you can create some really cool clay bands and things with that. But I'm going to start out on the smaller packages. I'm using a smaller die, and these are both sold as a set. I want to say they're about $10 for the set of those two dies. This one comes with the Shimpo extruder. The Shimpo extruder comes with a triangle, a square, a large round, the rectangle, the 12 hole, and then it also comes with a blank. So that blank, you can drill the 3 holes in if you want, or drill in a different size hole that you might want with it. But you'll probably, if you're gonna do smaller packages, you'll probably want to get those smaller dies. So I've got the small one in here. And when you start extruding the dies, a lot of times the clay wants to kind of curl. So I'll usually take and kind of press it down on the end. And then as I squeeze more out, I can take and kind of flatten this out on, oops, I got a rip in there, flatten it out on my surface and kind of straighten this out if it gets some curves to it. On the small, narrow ribbon, I don't often add textures to this because it is very thin. It is a very thin strip of clay. And if I start running a rolling pin over this with some textures, or even cutting, I took and did some star cutouts in this one. Let me grab it and show you. I just wanted to see if it would work. So in this one, I use the star cutter to cut out some stars in that ribbon. And it made it kind of fragile where it got close to the edges. And I had to go with the smallest one. I did the next size up, I liked better, but it made it really super fragile to handle those ribbons. So with that narrow ribbon, not going to probably be one that you're going to want to add a lot of texture to. And so I usually do a long enough strip that will fit over the top of my package and go down both sides and have just a little bit extra on the bottom. And I don't always score this because it's such a thin piece of clay. So I've got some slip mixed up here, and I'm just going to take and add some slip on the back side of this ribbon. And then I'm going to take and add this to my package and down the side. And I'll just kind of gently press this against the surface. I don't want to press too hard that I squish in the sides of my package, but I want to put these ribbons on while the clay is wet. I don't want this to get real firm because this will start to shrink. And if you add the ribbons and this is partially dry, your ribbons are going to shrink and then they're going to start cracking and wanting to fall off. Now, I did a little bit of extra on the bottom here. And the reason I do that is because then I will take and either use a wooden tool or my finger to kind of, and I'm lifting the package up and I'm taking that coil and I'm going to push it under the package and around that edge. If there isn't slip on that area, I will take and add a little bit of slip under there and roll it under that edge. And then I kind of take and I tap the package to really press that so that it's attached. And then I do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to add a little slip. I'm going to pick it up roll that under, and then tap it down. So I've got the ribbon going down both sides of the package. Normally I wouldn't be picking this up, and so the sides kind of, as I'm doing that, want to press it a little bit. And then I'm going to do another ribbon because this package is large enough. I'm going to add a ribbon coming in the opposite direction. On some of the smaller packages, I may only do a ribbon going around one way, but on this one, I'm going to have it going around both ways. Flatten that out. Lay it, I'm just laying it across here to get the length that I need, taking off any excess. I'm going to add a little slip. And I'm going to place it over the top, coming the other way, and again, gently tapping it to attach it. I found if you don't roll that ribbon under the bottom, some people didn't have enough slip toward the bottom of it, and as it dried, that ribbon wanted to kind of lift away from the piece. So you want to have it just a little bit longer than it needs to be. Roll it under that edge. All right, now we've got the ribbon going down both sides of, or all four sides of the package. Then the next thing to do is to make the bow. And the ribbon that goes around the package, I do slip that on. The bows, I don't. And the reason I don't with the bow is because it's a heck of a lot easier to paint when that bow can be lifted off the top and painted separately. And then when I glaze it and fire it, I just put that on and I fuse it right to the surface. And if you break the bow, it's a lot easier to replace it if it's not slipped and attached to the box in the clay stage. So I'm going to flatten out this ribbon. Going probably off my screen here, yep. And then I'm going to decide how big of a bow I want. And I will take and I will roll over the end of this so that I get a loop. And then I will break that off and I will set that one aside. And then I will do a couple more that are about the same size, 3 more actually. And where they overlap in the middle, I press them together. I'm going to do one more on this side, really squish it together in the middle. I've got a little bit of a tear in this, so I'm going to pull that off, but I'm going to save that because that'll be a good piece for probably the middle of my bow. So now we've got 4 sections. Because this is a larger package, then I'm going to make some smaller loops, and they're going to go in between, and each of those are going to get pressed. That piece is too small to work with. I'm probably going to have to reload this too. And so the 4 smaller ones go in between the 4 larger. Reload. I'm not going to reload this extruder completely. I don't need a ton more ribbon, so I'm just going to put a smaller piece of clay in here, so I don't need to pull the plunger back all the way. I will add my 4th part of the bow, and I really press in the middle of that to make sure that that's all stuck together well, make sure that my ribbons are good. And then one of those small pieces that I had, I can take and fold this over and make a loop that kind of wraps around my finger. And then I'm pressing with my thumb and my finger to attach those pieces. And then I can score a little bit in the middle of the bow. Can score a little bit on the bottom of this. I'm going to add a little slip. And I can take and press that. And I'm just using my finger that it was wrapped around to press that right in the middle. And then that bow, I can pick that up and I can set it on top of my package. And then that's when I'll kind of go like this, and I'll make sure that everything is positioned well and rounded nicely. And I'll just set that on there and let it dry on top of the box. I'm not adding that and slipping and scoring that on. And so we've got, here, we've got the whole box completed. It's our little bow sitting on the top. All right. So if you want to do one that is more solid, instead of doing coils of clay, on this one, I did the bark texture on the package. Bow was done the same way. Now, if you want ribbons coming off of here, you can also do those, taking some of the pieces of your ribbon clay. On the ends, I will usually either cut it off at an angle like this, and those can be set under your bow. A lot of times I will score and slip these on top of the box, but a couple of these, I didn't slip them all the way down, and you can see how that ribbon, as it dried, it kind of lifted up on there. So if you're gonna slip and score and put them on the piece, make sure that you put slip all the way down. This one was down on the side, but it lifted as it dried. Sometimes putting plastic over it will help slow that process, but a lot of times, because they're so thin, they dry quicker and they will lift. So use slip on there, because these are really dangerous to have sticking out like this on the box. But if you want to do a solid technique like this, or if you want to do more of an open technique. So this is the luminary that I did with the bark texture. That is done just taking your random pieces of clay and pressing them against whatever texture you're working with. If you're working with some type of a texture pad, or you can work with the rolling pins, you're just going to get that texture on the individual pieces. So I've got my bark texture pad. I'm just going to go along and press these in random areas to pick up that texture. And then as I put them into the mold, I'm putting that textured side down first. And if I want it solid, all of these pieces will just overlap one another. And I'll go up to that edge just like we did with the coils. And to attach those pieces, you would just take your finger and just gently squish them and drag the clay over. You don't want to press real hard, or you will lose that texture on those pieces, and you'll fill in basically that whole area of the mold. You can go, if you're going to have it open like this as a luminary, or you want to do it as a planter, sometimes you want to get rid of some of that rough texture in there from your fingers. That's where I'll use the towel, and I'll just kind of gently press on here. I don't want to press so hard that I lose my texture on the outside, but I'm just pressing enough to get rid of sharp edges and things. So I would fill that all in and then take it out. If I want that open effect, I'm going to do my pieces with the bark texture, and I'm just going to leave openings as I do it. I'm not going back and cutting out. I'm going to place pieces in the mold and then kind of stick these next to one another while leaving some openings in between them. And then I squish them together like I did with the solid method. And I do that all over the inside so that there's openings between them. When I put the two halves together, I want to have on the one side, so instead of doing loops or with like we did with the coils, I'm going to have some areas like here where I'm going to put some clay, but then I have to be able to bend that back again so that it's flush on the top. So when I put the two halves together, this piece isn't getting caught in between. So this is bent in all the way so that it's flush and it's not sticking up over that edge at all. And I put the two halves together, going with the press tool, same as we did with the coils, kind of pressing and dragging to attach the two halves together. Your bows and everything are done the same way then. Any questions on that, Jessica?
No, there is not. Everybody is just saying how much they're enjoying this, and it looks fun. And hi. And the great thing about this is this will be available for a replay probably about an hour after the broadcast ends, so folks can go back and rewatch it. So if you want to get started on making one of these right now and you need to go back, you gotta wait a few minutes, but that's okay.
So we got a couple minutes here. I know you'll need a couple minutes at the end here, but I'll show quickly just kind of different textures. I'm just changing out the die on here to that Shimpo one because I like this die because look at how thick that strip of clay is. And you can take and do coils like this, straighten them out, and you can use, like on the big package, I did use the large Kemper die. I didn't use the Shimpo, but it's not that much bigger. So if you get that Shimpo, Nidec Shimpo extruder, you can do these thicker coils. And then I took the snowflake rolling pin and I just rolled that across the top so that my ribbon had snowflake texture. And this die I will use a lot of times when I do vases and I want to add a band of clay around the top or finish the rim. I will use this to make those pieces. And I just got my daisy rolling pin yesterday came and I didn't get a chance to really play around, but I'm thinking, oh, this would be a cool one to use. Whoops. Oh yeah. Look at that. Picture that around. So I'm just looking to see here. Okay, I've got this vase. And let's say in the clay state, I could add, this is a little big for this little vase, but if I wanted to add a strip of clay around the middle of that vase that I've made, or I wanted the top to be finished off, I could take this and bend it around the top to give that texture around the rim. I've done that on a lot of the pieces that I've clay puzzled or thrown. I just got this other cool roller. I was curious to see how this one would. I am getting the dragonfly and the weeds and stuff in there. So really any rolling pins, textures and stuff you can do with that. Just looking back to see the only other thing that I thought about, and like I've got some of Debbie's little rollers here too. She's got her sunflower. This woven pattern, I think is pretty cool. See if I go over the snowflakes, if I can get that. Yeah. Get that woven texture on there. So even the plastic snowflake stamps that she has, I think those could be used because that coil is thick enough that you could get that texture in there as well. The other thing that I thought about adding to my packages was using the holly leaf forms or the poinsettia leaf forms and having some little, slide this back here, some little poinsettia leaves kind of sticking out and coming up under there, I think would be really cool too. So I'm going to probably add some of these to it. I won't do it now. We're getting toward the end here, but I think I can add some little holly leaves, some poinsettia leaves and stuff in there too, would really add to them and make them really cool.
Fabulous. So do you have any finished ones you want to share with folks? Some folks that came in late, missed the beginning, or maybe didn't see any images.
So this is the one that we just built. was the extruder, the large square one. And this is the large square one doing the bark texture instead of the coils inside of that mold, putting the ribbons down the sides. And this one is the large rectangular one. This is a brand new mold that we introduced, done with the coil technique. And then this is the one that I did the snowflakes in the ribbon, the snowflake rolling pin in the ribbon. Picture that with lights strung underneath. And this was the using it as a luminary. So instead of being turned this way, which you could do it this way too if you wanted, but this would be a cool luminary. You can do these solid, make them as planters. So, you know, when I look at different shapes, I don't always go, oh, that is a package. But on my website, I show it as a package. And so that's all people think about is it's a Christmas package, you know, but you can do birthday packages. You can do 4th of July. I was looking at, like, Debbie has her little star roller. I was like, oh, we could make the ribbons with star designs on it. You know, it can be for other holidays and other uses too. So I always try to show multiple uses. I think the spheres, I have shown about 1 million different techniques, and the cones about 1 million different techniques with them. But I figure if people are investing in it, I want to make sure that they have lots of different uses. So I'm always trying to come up with new things to do with things that we already have.
And what's your glaze plan for them?
So my glaze plan, good question. So on the coil technique, for those of you who were in on the live with the spheres, I'm going to do the exact same thing with the coil packages. So fire it, and then I do a wash of like Mako stroke and coat. You can use, people asked after I did this one, could I use underglazes? Yep, underglazes will work as well. Paula McCoy's color concentrates will work. Basically brush a layer on, wipe it back with a sponge, and that color catches in all of the crevices. And you see the white of the clay or the buff color of the clay. This also is speckled with the color concentrates using a toothbrush or a fan brush or a splatter brush, clear glazed, fired, mother of pearled, and fired. And so I do the same thing with the packages, the finished pictures that you saw. I did the washes, wiping back. And then on the ribbons, I added a little bit of design on some of them, just using like Mako's designer liner. If you're good with a brush, you can get really creative with it. Stamps also would work on there as well. So that's the plan with those. The one that has the bark texture, I kind of want to do a set with like a pastel, like Celadon type glaze, I think, on the texture, or a glaze that will break on the texture, I think would be really cool. And then some solid color designs on the ribbons.
That would be really cool. Well, you're going to have to come back and share all of the finished pieces you've made this month with us, because you've done so many. And we've got one more planned for after Thanksgiving. So
right.
Not next week, because that's Thanksgiving week, but the week after, and that'll be on Tuesday. So
Correct.
That'll be on the 29th. So awesome, Michael. Fabulous as always. I ordered a couple sets of the gift box forms. I'm just, no hurry though when you get to them.
And we're tonight we'll be finishing up almost every order that we have through the first part of this week. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I'm excited to try these out. They'll be fun. So I might not make them for Christmas, but like you said, birthday presents or just to make a luminary or something else, I think it'd be great for that. All right. Thank you. We have a giveaway now. So are you all ready?
Michael has been so generous this month by sponsoring the ClayShare giveaways, and he has done 4 $100 gift certificates for his website. That's learnfiredarts.com. He has a bunch of things on sale. That's where I ordered my molds from. I also got the ribbon dies too, because I don't have them yet, and I'm going to use them in my extruder. But the person that wins this is going to get a $100 gift certificate to spend there on anything they want. And we have one more after tonight too. So if you don't win tonight, you can win next time. And to enter all of our giveaways, you just go to clayshare.com, sign up for our emails, and that's it. Now, premium members of ClayShare, you guys know who you are, you're automatically entered in all of our giveaways always. So you don't have to do anything. You just sit back, relax, and watch Michael make his fabulous pieces. All right. Are you ready? I've got a little ClayShare business. I'm debating on whether I tell you who won or I tell you what's going down. So we have the ClayShare Veterans Scholarship that we do every year. And the application is open for that. You can go to clayshareresources.com to fill that application out. If you are a military veteran from any country, any branch of the service, or a veteran caregiver, you're eligible to be awarded this scholarship. It's a lifetime membership, premium membership to ClayShare. So please check that out. You have till the end of the month to fill out those applications, and then we will be announcing on December 14th who will be winning that. And there's no number. We don't say we only give away 2. It's just, it's all need-based, merit-based. It's just, we give it to whoever we think can benefit from it. So please go ahead and fill that out, if not on your behalf, on the behalf of another veteran that you might know. Okay, so tonight's winner of the $100 Michael Harbridge gift certificate is Patty Zeitz. Patty, congratulations. You've got yourself $100 to spend at Michael Harbridge's LearnFiredArts.com. I spent way more than that already today. So it's super easy to do because he has so many amazing things. You're going to love it. Other ClayShare business next week is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And you know what that means. It's the 12 gifts for potters. So I will have my annual 6 years I've been doing it. The 12 gifts for potters, where I will sing to you and also just tell you the 12 things I think are amazing that have come out in the last year that you should get for yourself or gift another potter. And also you can make your own little wish list up from that to give to someone else to get for you. All right, next we have our prime time broadcast for premium members of ClayShare, and we're going to have our ornament party. I've got some examples of past ornament parties. This is something we do every year as well, and we like to do it a little before Thanksgiving so you guys can have time to make your ornaments, maybe over the holiday with family. I have got a brand new one for you, this angel wing ornament we're going to be making, and a whole bunch of others. I think I'm making 8 ornaments tonight. So you have to come watch that at 6:15 p.m. If you can't make the live broadcast, that's okay. It's recorded. You can catch the replay later. All right, again, a huge thank you to Michael Harbridge for sponsoring this month on ClayShare and for joining us, and we'll see him again in 2 weeks. Everybody else, take care, be well, and I'll see my premium members soon. Bye, everybody.